Hi everyone, welcome to On the Mic. This week we kick off with the first of our videos in our Let's Talk Hacking series. Last week I introduced you to my panel, Dave Wilson, CEO of IT360, and Pete Van Zyl, our resident and in-house cybersecurity expert. Guys, say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having us.
So we are very excited. We sort of gave you an introduction to hacking in our initial video, but today we're going to really jump in with some really cool advice and tools and solutions from our expert panel. When it comes to hacking, I think we all know that no one is safe, especially if you're using your internet. You pretty much are opening yourself up to a lot of risk. And if you ask people what's hacking, probably 99% of the time, they're going to be able to give you an explanation. But if you ask them how they're actually protecting themselves or what are they using to protect themselves, I think that's where it starts getting very grave for most people. A lot of individuals or businesses will say, well, I've got password protectors for my staff and for myself, or I've got an antivirus system. And is that enough? Well, I think that's the debatable point. And that's what our guys are going to really lead into today. So guys, Pitt, let's try and get our heads around this. What is hacking?
Well, I mean, in layman's terms, it's basically someone just breaking in and stealing something. So whether it be data or information or emails or whatever the case is, and hacking is actually that breaking in factor. A little bit more terminology around it is unauthorized access into your data.
Okay, so guys, we've spoken about this and we're very passionate about our 4 tips. And I know there's a lot in the market, right? Everyone's talking about hacking and you get 5 tips, 10 tips, there's a lot. But why are we so passionate about these 4 tips specifically, Dave?
Yeah, thanks Jess. I think the reality is there are so many things that you could implement as a business. If you Google it, you're going to find hundreds and hundreds of different solutions out there. But as a business, we're always trying to take the pain out of IT, trying to make IT simple and actionable for our clients. As a business owner, you don't want to be overwhelmed by the number of things, but we want to give you a simple, actionable list of tips to take away today. So we'll do that in this video.
But I think also one of the things we've been seeing with our clients, I mean, and Pete, you probably exposed to that quite often, is that we're not dealing with technically minded people, right? That's probably 99% of our clients, or just people out there in the public in general. And I think a large part of that is driven by the fact that people are very fearful of this. They're very fearful of saying, I don't know what hacking is. I don't know what's the right antivirus system to sort of get for myself or for my company or for my family. And I think what we want to address in this video is how do you get around that? And how do we best prepare our clients and people for that, right? So shall we dive in with what would be the first tip?
So, the first tip is using the technology that you have, or using technology. So, there's so much out there, like you mentioned, firewalls, antivirus, that is using it. So firewalls is a good perimeter defense on a company, on the location. Microsoft's threat protection, advanced threat protection, is basically a technology that protects you against phishing and all of those items. So there's a lot out there, but it's using what you have, implementing what you have.
Well, not phishing as in a rod. Right?
No, not that kind of phishing. Can elaborate a little bit on some of the technical details. So phishing is sending out a fake email, trying to look like somebody or a company or whatever to try and catch you out and get your details and information. We're going to talk more about this as the videos go on. But using the technology to protect yourself against the threats out there, or at least the methods that they use to break into your systems. So, yeah.
Okay, so if technology was a medicine, it's basically how are we using it to treat or diagnose that hacking issue, right? Okay.
That's right.
Makes sense.
But Pete, like, as an IT provider, how common do we take on a new customer and they don't have a firewall, or they don't have what we would deem as some basic cybersecurity defenses?
Yeah, that happens quite often. I would almost say that majority of the clients that we take on think they have something in place.
Yeah.
So when you have a firewall that's not properly set up, or set up to do half the things that you pay for that it can do, what's the point in having it? It's like a brick against the wall. It doesn't count anything.
So there's 2 pieces of advice to them. One, it's technology and using the technology.
Yeah. Taking the medicine.
You can have medicine there, but you got to actually take it too.
Yes, exactly. And in the right time frame and windows. And
Nice.
Okay. Well, what happens though when your team is working remotely? Because a big part of that you spoke about is, especially when your staff have company issued devices, and now we've seen, especially with COVID, everyone's working remotely, or you have agile working, so you sometimes off in your partner offices. What happens in a case like that?
A lot of the technology opens these doors up for you. So in cases like using a VPN to your office actually protects your staff, their laptops when they sit in the coffee shop. How do you know they're protected in there? How do you know they're protected at home with their home grade router that they have, no firewall? With everyone working remote, you've actually exposed more of your company than you've actually realized. And in cases like this, so if we implement, for example, a firewall, we adding on to that with, in the cases of VPN, protecting your staff when they're outside. In cases of, for example, again, Microsoft's advanced threat protection, it's protecting their email regardless where they are in the world. So we do take that into account, and it is a bigger focus than it was even a year ago.
So MFA, that's going to take us to our next tip.
Yes.
Lovely term that our tech guys
Yeah.
like to lean on. What is it? Let's just touch a bit around MFA.
So MFA, multi-factor authentication. Some people call it two-factor authentication. There's a bit of a difference. Multi-factor authentication is just you proving that you are you, in a simple term. So if you imagine your mobile device has got your MFA token on it. So you try and log into your email. It triggers the need for an MFA code. You technically log into your mobile device with your fingerprint, and that then gives you the code. So you've logged in not only at the website with the password, on your phone with your fingerprint, and then you get a code to actually prove it's you. So that's the word multi-factor authentication. So it's got different factors. A little bit contradicting to the two-factor authentication, where it's receive an SMS, just put it in without unlocking your phone. That's the gist.
So it's similar to when you're on Facebook, for instance, and you need to change a password.
Yep,
it would work on the similar premise?
Correct. You would even use the same multi-factor authentication application. So, for example, something that probably a lot of people use is Google Authenticator. So you would have your Facebook authentication in there. You would have your email authentication in there. So probably a big pushback from employees is, but my personal device, how do I what? So technically, an employee using their personal device is proving that that's the individual, not necessarily the company. So it's you, Dave, proving that Dave is logging into that area. So it's actually needed for an employee to use their mobile device, not a company's device, if you want to say that.
Yeah, well, so this is an added layer of protection for companies, right?
Correct.
How many companies or organizations in New Zealand, or probably globally, do you think is actually enabling MFA for their staff?
It's way lower than you would be surprised. It's, I mean, as you're pointing out, it's a layer of authentication. So if someone breaks through the first layer, which is the technology part, this stops people from getting in there, and you need to provide another layer of authentications. And you would almost say that, it's a common thing, please do it. I want to be as bold as saying 70% don't have it implemented. So.
Wow. So how much alignment do you think there is between senior management and the staff within an organization from an MFA perspective, or just from a general hacking perspective?
A good question. I think what I've seen with customers, a lot of, like everybody, we want technology to be simple and seamless. So a non-technical person might shun MFA because of the perception it's quite hard or adds a layer of complexity to my work. And the reality is, these days, MFA doesn't just come in the form of the traditional 6-character. You can also get push notifications, for example, clicking one button to approve, and really that small action actually gives you, I don't know how to quantify it, but 100 times the protection of what you had before. So it's a really, really critical thing. So in terms of misalignment, you might get some cases where management team really want it, but the end users don't buy into the idea, or staff don't buy into the idea, or the opposite. And actually an end user could be more educated because they're doing it in their personal lives, and the opposite is true, the management don't care about it. So I often see misalignment between the management and the staff, and that kind of leads into the education. A lot of us, we don't take value in most things unless we care about them, unless we understand them. So education is a massive part of what we do here and what we believe in. Yeah. We're even starting to push some customers into adding cybersecurity training into their induction with their new staff. It's that important. It needs to become that important that it's not just about, hey, here's the office and here's the staff and your colleagues, but hey, we so want to value cybersecurity that we're going to add a little module to this in your training. Yeah. So there's a whole lot to talk about training, guys.
Yeah. So tip 3, make sure your staff, your internal organization, is properly educated and trained around the technology and having MFA or everything else that's implemented for the company. We're stressing the importance of training our staff, educating them, giving them the right tools. The more recent focus now has been the privacy laws that are going to be coming into effect into New Zealand the latter part of this year. What is it going to be the effect of this in terms of staff being, adequately trained and on board around this? What's the repercussions if they're not?
Yeah, the reality is we're going to cover off privacy. This actually really warrants its own episode and its own video. So we're going to deep dive into this a lot more later. But at a high level, the government is putting in new privacy laws, which ultimately leave the directors of a business liable for fines up to $10,000 based on privacy breaches, data breaches and things like that. So at a high level, it's really something that business owners and leaders need to take serious consideration of. And of course, if a staff member accidentally was the person who lost the password, didn't set up MFA, or did something that caused the breach, unfortunately the business is now liable for that. So it's now getting serious. It's now getting real. These laws have been in place in other places like the US and Australia for a long, long time, and they've come to New Zealand now, likely following suit from those other countries.
Yeah, okay. And then training, Peter, how often do you recommend that companies do this?
Well, in the case of how often, I would probably say getting people upskilled generally is important. I mean, employees are generally seen as the weakest link, especially if we talk about someone walking to your company, walking to a door, our employees actually trusting them, not trusting them. So that's even besides the point. Training based on elements usage. So for example, phishing, being aware of phishing, that kind of training is modules we can offer that we can provide training for staff. So it's a tracked thing. So it's, look, my employee has actually achieved this in said area. When we get to sort of our last part, when it comes to the audit side, the audit will actually tell you how important it is if your staff is adequately trained in certain areas or not. So we'll probably answer the question more there, but
okay, so let's jump into audits. I found it actually quite strange that a lot of the times when companies or solution providers will go out to clients, they'll pretty much recommend, let's just do this audit and let's overhaul your business. Now, small businesses don't have the money to do that, right? In our case, though, we tend to pull the audit to the last thing that we actually recommend for our clients. So why is that?
So there's definitely varying cases. I mean, in regards to when we take a new client on board, during that onboarding phase, we'll a lot of times recommend an audit be done as well, checking your security side. So we need to make sure that the client, where they actually sit at the moment. We'll then utilize as much of the technology we can right there. And that's the point where a lot of people think that's what the audit is expectant of. When that initial audit gets done, they try and sell so much technology. This is what's going to keep you busy for the next 3 years, but you'll only enable MFA 2 years down the line. That's too late. That's too late. A lot of the things we have to implement now to get you protected, and you might already have said technology is just not enabled, just not turned on, just not staff isn't trained on it, or there was pushback. It's like you mentioned there with MFA, it's in the too hard basket. So all of that can be implemented already. So there's probably not that much spending required for you to be on board or to be in the right area. You probably don't require so much spending to actually sit in the, I'm now at least protected and the capability if I can, and so now I can invest into future things. Audits being done at the end, getting orders done every 6 months, every year. I mean, it depends on your industry. There's, with the privacy law and things, there's going to be recommendations, at least from my end, where you need to be audited at least once a year. You need to know where your vulnerabilities are, because as technology changes on a day-to-day basis, if you don't do these audits, you won't know what you lack. Even from us as an IT provider, I can install the latest and greatest servers and $200,000 equipment right now. Tomorrow there might be a vulnerability in one of those updates. So what was the point of it all?
Okay, well, when we think audit, we always think of this elaborate process, right? Somebody's coming in and they're nitpicking on every part of my business. Can we give our listeners an indication of what our audit would entail? Because we do offer free 30-minute consultations. So what would something like that entail for clients, or just for individuals in general?
So we'll probably scan the current Active Directory, bit of a lingo there, but it's looking at how the infrastructure is set up at the moment, where the holes and vulnerabilities are, do a few prods and pokes and see if there's any obvious holes, see if things like their firewalls have been set up properly. So there's quite a bit that we can delve deeper into, but in a nutshell, we'll try and test and see where the faults are and vulnerabilities are. But it also depends on the size of the client, on how much is needed. So.
Sounds great. Okay, well, there you've got it, guys. Our 4 tips. You guys want to do a quick recap on them for our listeners?
Absolutely. Thank you. So the 4 tips we talked about today. Number 1, the use of technology. Massive important, both the use and the technology.
Drinking
and exactly right. You can have medicine, but you need to take it. Number 2 was MFA. We talked about that layer being really a quick win as well for most businesses today. Most businesses don't have it, and yet it's almost the most important thing to do today.
Yes.
So definitely take action on that one. Number 3 being education and training. Your people are half the problem. Technology is the other half. Don't forget your people. The people are really there to be another layer of defense. If your people are trained on the core fundamentals, and of course people like ourselves can provide that training. And then the last thing is an audit process. Both people use it at the start or the end of the process, but let's not do a long audit when there are some really quick wins like MFA and like other things that actually can be done in just a matter of a few days. We can audit after we've implemented a number of the sort of quick wins, so to speak. Is that covering it?
Yeah, it sounds great. So guys, this was just our 4 tips, at a minimum, trying to help you in terms of protecting your business. The thing with hacking though, and Peter and I are always talking about it, hackers are smart. So even though you might be putting systems in place, it doesn't mean a hacker is going to sleep tonight thinking, well, they've protected themselves, I'm not going to do anything further. They're constantly evolving a way of how they're going to try and breach your company or your system. And we're going to cover a lot of that in our forthcoming videos. For today's tips, please go to our website, www.it360.co.nz. And if you are interested, book yourself a free 30-minute consultation. It'll be with one of our expert panels, and we've got amazing people in our background that do that for our clients. And yes, anything that we can do to help you. Once again, drop your comments on this post if you have any questions, and we're going to be addressing them in our next video coming your way very shortly within the next few days, where we're going to talk about, I think, DDoS, right, Peter? We're going to be covering off DDoS, another very interesting topic. Especially relevant now.
Yeah.
And then we're going to follow that up with phishing and privacy law. Extremely important. We're going to have some really amazing guests. So thank you so much for joining us for today's video. And we look really forward to seeing your comments. And please remember to follow us on our LinkedIn page, IT360. That's it for today, guys. Have a great weekend and be safe.
Ciao.